So the College Football 25 Dynasty Deep Dive was just released a day ago, and man, was it amazing. A lot of depth in the article. If you have not read that article, go ahead and read it. It's a long read, but a good one. A lot of nuggets in there, and it's hard to fit everything in one video from that article, but there is a lot. So today I'm gonna quickly go over some of the top 20 underrated items that were added to College Football 25's Dynasty, and I will kind of go into detail into each one of those. So first, I have an honorable mention, and it's just the fonts and menus. They got this right. They could have got this wrong in so many ways, because MLB The Show is a perfect example. Their fonts are terrible. It's hard to read. It's just not a good look. The UI on Dynasty looks amazing. The menus look clean. Everything's separated out. It's easy to look at. And one thing I do want to highlight here is this Colorado versus Colorado State screenshot. If you look at kind of the menus, the main menus, you have actions, you have college football, coach, team, stats and records, and Dynasty Central. In this weekly to-do list, you obviously have your game to play, but below that you have top stories. They have not shown a screenshot of what the top stories looks like. I'm actually curious on what it does. Maybe it's going to look like the old NCAA 14, where it has kind of what you see on the right side, where you have the right stick. You can kind of go over for each story. We'll see. I'm not exactly sure, but the menus are clean in Dynasty. So I'm going to jump all over the place 1 through 20, and we're going to start at number 1. It's recruiting abilities by position. So when you start Dynasty, you can begin with 3 different archetypes, those being motivator, recruiter, and tactician. And the abilities within them are diverse and range from roster management and program culture to home field advantage and recruiting pipeline boosts. So as you can see here in this screenshot, you'll kind of see you have the recruiter kind of archetype here, and you can kind of see the skills within it. Now you can upgrade all of these abilities up to 4 times. So each ability has 4 tiers within itself. And then as you unlock, a certain row of abilities, you will unlock the next row of abilities. So this one that's highlighted here is for running backs. So you can see this is for the running game. Level 1 is advanced look. Number 2 is most influential. Number 3 is tier 3, I should say, is always be recruiting. And you can just see, this is influential for running backs specifically. So you could have a head coach who's really good at recruiting running backs or really good at recruiting quarterbacks, and they may lack in other areas such as offensive line. And that's where you'll need to kind of hire coordinators that will kind of balance you out a little bit. Number 2, leading into my next point, coordinators upgrade skills on their own. So building off of what I just talked about with getting abilities and tailoring that towards what you want to recruit and develop, you also can hire coordinators that will have certain skills, but you cannot upgrade those skills. They will progress on their own automatically. So you do have to be careful with the coordinators that you hire. Let's just say you're a quarterback guru as a head coach. Well, you want an offensive coordinator that's really good with receivers, and you hire him right away. There's no guarantee that he's going to keep developing with receivers. He may develop other skills such as offensive line or running backs, which will help him out when getting a head coaching job, but might necessarily hurt you. You never know. And that's where the decision is going to have to be made. Do you retain a coordinator that's kind of not developing the way you would like, but you're still doing well with them? Or do you move on and go to another coordinator that maybe has more of the skill set that you're looking for? But you also have to run the risk reward of keeping a guy and then potentially just not having that guy develop the way you want, or firing the guy or having that guy move on and then having to start over and having to run those same risks over and over again. Like, I love that because obviously you want full control over everything, but you can't control literally everything. Coordinators will develop skills on their own, and which will help them kind of get their own head coaching jobs, and you'll be able to follow them through the carousel. So number 3 on the list, I have decommits. So in the deep dive, they highlighted that when players do commit to your school, it is a verbal commitment. The reason why that is because every recruit has certain values assigned to them, so what they are looking for in your school, but also they have a deal breaker. Every recruit has one deal breaker. Now let's just say, for example, that deal breaker is coach prestige, and you have maybe a B coach prestige, and that is the player's minimum, right? So you meet that deal breaker. Now, let's just say, for example, you get this guy to commit to your school, then go 0 whatever. So you only win 1 or 2 games in a season. Your coach prestige may go down. And even though that recruit already committed to your school, your coach prestige is now at a C+, right? Well, that no longer meets his criteria for a coach prestige, which is one of his deal breakers, which means he will decommit from your school since you broke his one deal breaker, and now it's open season for him again, and he will go elsewhere. So that is very, very cool. You have to remain good and make sure you stay good within the areas of your recruits, and that not only affects recruiting, you have to also make sure you are on par with your current roster as well, because those deal breakers stay with the roster, and I will highlight that as one of my other points a little later. So number 4, development traits. This was something that was kind of missing from NCAA 14 back in the day, but we will talk about the different development traits here. There are 4 of them. First, normal. These players are most common and progress at a standard rate. Expect them to steadily grow over their career. That was kind of what was in the old games. Everybody was just kind of a normal dev, and they developed at the same pace. The number 2 development trait is impact. The type of player that can really change a team. They'll progress faster than normal with higher upside. So these are guys that will obviously progress faster. They may not necessarily be, a elite player, but those are the next tiers here. The next tier is star, a potential Sunday player. There are very few of these to go around, and they'll establish themselves early as fast learners. So they talked about this in the deep dive, the fast learners. As a freshman and as a sophomore, you may develop a lot faster early on in your career as you're getting acclimated to college football and you're a young player, adding weight to your body, getting stronger, getting faster. All that stuff plays into it. And if you have a higher development trait, those impacts will be greater. And then the final development trait, elite, the best of the best. These players will make a statement the moment they get on campus and have the potential to be an all-time great. That is amazing because they already said that star players are few. Elite players are very few. So it's going to be hard to find these guys, but I do wonder how hard it is going to be to find these guys as 2 or 3-star commits. Who knows, but it will be possible to find these diamonds in the rough, and they will develop at a exponentially faster pace than the rest of the team. Number 5, the gem and bust system for each star recruit. Now, I'm going to build off of the last point a little bit when talking about this one. So, in NCAA 14, when you recruited, you could find gems or busts, but they seem to pretty much be a gem at a certain level or a bust at a certain level, meaning it would probably be like a +5 as a gem and maybe a -5 is a bust. And it was kind of consistent, not very variable. You kind of got the +5, -5, +7, -7. It was kind of around the same range. But based on now their recruiting star rating, they will at least decline at a certain point to a certain point and improve at an exponential point. So let's just give you an example. A 5-star bust may end up being a bust, but might just be the equivalent of a 4-star recruit. Let's just counter that. If a 3-star is a bust, they might be like a 1-star prospect. Like, they might be terrible when you recruit them. And that kind of shows you the difference between maybe a 5-star prospect and maybe the normal 3 stars or 2 stars. Also, to counter that, if you find a 2-star gem, that may be a 4-star caliber player, or a 3-star gem, they may be an upper echelon 4-star player. So if you do find those gems or those diamonds in the rough as smaller recruits, they might end up being really, really good. Now, the deep dive did note that it's hard to find those guys in particular. There's not going to be a ton of them that are gems as 2-star recruits, but it could happen. But if it does, you found yourself a diamond. But just know, if you are a bigger program and find a bust as a 5-star, it doesn't mean they're going to be horrible. It just means that they're probably just going to be like a 4-star recruit. They're not going to decline that much. So number 6 on the list, some my school grades do not change. Now, back in NCAA 14, every school grade changed. So for example, academics prestige is the best example I could find back in that game, which used to change in NCAA 14 if you recruited and players didn't have to wait a long time to play. Over time, that grade would change based on if you're recruiting players and they're playing, as soon as possible. But in college football 25, some grades simply you cannot change for your school. So for example, academic prestige does not change. It is based off of real life academic data. And then campus lifestyle also will not change because it's just the campus lifestyle. It's not going to change. So if you're recruiting from Boise State, I'm guessing their campus lifestyle won't be as great. I know there's some Boise State fans who will argue with me there, but in Idaho, I don't think it's going to rival something like Miami or Texas or something like that, or Georgia, or any place that's got a big, campus environment lifestyle and their football program is everything. So I like that's in the game. Number 7, keeping redshirt status. So as you recruit players and you develop your roster, you will have freshmen who just naturally have to wait their turn. Now, let's just say you're having a mediocre season. Let's just say you're under 500. You're not really seeing the season going anywhere at some point, but you want to get some freshmen some playing time. Maybe you want to keep them happy. Maybe they had a deal breaker of playing time and you need to make sure they do meet that requirement. You can play them up to 4 games in a season and still keep their redshirt status. Now, this is helpful, especially when developing players that maybe you don't know about. You just want to give them a try, but you still also want to redshirt them. So in a case where, like I said, your receivers are struggling, they're dropping all the passes, let's just put this freshman and see what he can do. You can do that up to 4 games, which is awesome, and still obviously keep that red shirt on that player. Number 8, changing conference updates, the field and jersey patches. This is amazing. Look at the screenshot here. James Madison got promoted to the ACC. Now, you do have the ability to do this yourself with custom conferences. So if you decide to move a team up or down in a conference, their field patches will change and their jersey patches will change. So at the hash marks 25-yard mark, you're going to see, a Sunbelt logo update to the ACC, or you're going to see a MAC logo update to the Big Ten, whatever you decide to do. And then you will also see the jersey patches of the conference logo also update, which is pretty cool. Number 9, coaches have pipelines. This is, I think, better than the system that we had before where you could just recruit a certain number of players and then gain that pipeline. Now coaches actually have pipelines. So let's just say, for example, you have a team in Michigan, but you want to be really, really well versed in Florida and Texas because they're really good recruiting hotbeds. You could hire offensive and defensive coordinators from those two states, and they would allow you to have a certain boost because they are very well versed within those states. Now, like I highlighted earlier, there are skills tied to certain coaches. So add the pipeline aspect from a coach, then add the skills from a coach. You could be basically a specialist at recruiting at a position within that state, which is actually really, really awesome. Number 10, keeping deal breakers for current roster players. Now, I talked about this a little bit earlier with kind of the deal breakers with recruits, but you also have to monitor deal breakers with your current team. Because if you end up breaking a deal breaker for a player on your roster, they may be a big time candidate to transfer away from your program and enter the transfer portal. It's just something to monitor. So my example of if a player has playing time as their deal breaker, you might want to play them a little bit more if you do want to keep them. Or if they have something such as coach prestige, well, you got to make sure you win. Otherwise, they're not going to want to play for you. Or if they have championship contender as one of their deal breakers, you got to win a championship. Otherwise, they're going to be transferring out. So you got to be careful with, how you are managing your roster. And I love it because that leads me into my next point. Number 11, roster size is up to 85 players. And this is what makes the deal breakers a lot better. No longer are you just going to lose a star player and not have replacements for him. You're going to have options. Do you want to load up on receiver? Sure, go ahead. If you have a bunch of diva receivers, maybe you behind them you have a bunch of walk-on receivers or a bunch of guys that maybe are not having the same values as the top guys. You never know, and it allows you to build that depth within a roster because like I said, if you're a struggling football team and you just cannot find an identity or you can't find these core players, maybe there's somebody on the roster that is sitting behind, the depth chart that you might want to just play and see what they have. The 85 players definitely allows you to do that and try out different players, even at different positions. Number 12, uncommitted recruits will walk on. Gone are the days in NCAA 14 where you recruited somebody, you offered them a scholarship, you got to the national signing day, and then all of a sudden they don't commit to a team. Well, that is still in the game, but this time they're not just going to drop off the face of the earth. If you are their top school and they are uncommitted, they will just walk on to your school. So that is pretty cool. There are actual walk-ons now that will walk on. And I'm wondering, back in NCAA 14, there were surprise walk-ons. There were guys that were not added to your board that still walked on to your program. That's probably still in the game, which I really liked back in NCAA 14, but I hated the fact that I would be recruiting a guy, hammering him with points, and he just didn't commit and then just doesn't do anything. So now if there's a guy in the offseason that, you want to put some points at, you don't really know what his skills are, you haven't scouted him, you just want him to, commit to your school, you can do that. He will walk on and be at your program no matter what if you're number one on his board. Number 13, mental abilities won't change. They talked about this a little bit, and I'm not going to go into detail, but there are physical abilities and mental abilities. Physical abilities are based on player ratings. So based on, let's just say 95 speed. I don't know what the ability is for that, but let's just say it's called Speed Demon, right? You are very, very fast. You have that ability. You also have mental abilities, which are tied to mental things such as composure, such as starting off games fast, such as closing games. All of those abilities that are attached to a player will not change. So let's, for example, say that I recruited a receiver that I eventually want to go over to cornerback. That kind of happens literally all the time in college football. Players are recruited as receivers, they move over to cornerback. Now let's just say going from their freshman to cornerback or freshman to sophomore year, I switch their positions. Their mental abilities still will not change. So if they have the ability that they don't start slow, that they start fast, they're really good out of the gate, they will be really good out of the gate regardless of position that you play them at. So those abilities will not change. They will always stick on the player throughout their career. Number 14, removing divisions from custom conferences. One of my favorite features here. Every single conference, I believe this year, correct me if I'm wrong down in the comment section, pretty much has no divisions anymore except the Sun Belt. The Sun Belt is the one conference that still has divisions. Every other conference across the FBS pretty much has it so that the top two teams, I should say, play in the conference championship. So if you want to even out the playing field and make it so that the Sun Belt also follows those same rules, you can do that. You can also set a conference championship site. That was back in NCAA 14, so I'm glad they brought that back. But if you wanted to bring back divisions within conferences, you can also do that as well. So you can do mix and match which conferences you want to have divisions, or you can make it so that they all have divisions or none of them have divisions, which is a pretty good detail. All right, number 15 on the list. Top recruits have different values than lower recruits. I hinted at this a little bit when I was talking about your active roster, but in recruiting, if you're recruiting 5 stars, let's just say you're at Michigan, Ohio State, Texas, one of the bigger programs, and you're recruiting 5-star recruits. Now, you will see that what they value is more of pro potential, national exposure, championship contender, NIL, which is now brand exposure in college football 25. Those are kind of the like values that they will value when you're going after them. But when you look at lower recruits, they may have just different values, such as academic prestige, such as playing style. They may not necessarily value playing time. The higher the recruit, they will definitely value more of the exposure, the playing time, the big time lights, the bright lights. When lower recruits, they will kind of focus on other things, things that are more of, happiness within the program, such as player development, playing style, playing against or playing with other players that maybe can develop with them, that camaraderie. That's kind of what they're looking for, rather than the top recruits who are looking for more of that exposure, which is pretty cool. Point number 16 here, unlimited impact players. Now, this is pretty cool because there was a screenshot, I believe it was Georgia, where they showed the offensive line showing like all impact players along with the quarterback and running back. And that is awesome. Unlimited. You could literally have a full team of impact players. They did not go into detail what the qualifications are for impact player. Is it just a guy that's putting up good stats, or is it a guy that's more of a higher overall? Who knows? But I'm pretty sure it's performance based. So that is pretty cool that you will have like an unlimited amount of impact players. I want to see the day where somebody has like a full offense, impact players, and a full defense. That would be pretty funny to see. Number 17 here, persuading players to transfer. Now, this is a hidden feature within the game, but I talked about the roster size being expanded to 85. What that does is it gives you an ability to develop players within your program. But also you can run into an issue where maybe you get a little more walk-ons than you expected, or you just recruit a little heavy, or you recruit too heavy at a position and you cannot keep guys happy. To kind of make your life easier, you can persuade players to transfer away. I want to give you like a real life scenario here. I don't know if you guys remember this, but before this year's NFL draft and leading up to that, it was a big question whether Quinn Ewers would go to the NFL because the Manning son, Arch Manning, was projected to be a starter at the FBS level this coming season. Well, fast forward to now, Quinn Ewers stayed, but maybe if you wanted to as the coach, you can say, hey, Quinn Ewers, I'm going to persuade you to transfer because Arch Manning is our guy. Texas could have went that route. They could have said, hey, you should go to the NFL because Arch Manning is up next. He's ready to play. He's our guy. That's now a thing within the game. If you don't like maybe a senior leader on your team and you just recruited this awesome freshman, you know who's going to get, a lot of playing time and you want to keep him happy, you know he's going to play, you can persuade the older guy to transfer, but you cannot persuade new recruits. So once you recruit those freshmen to transfer right away, that is not possible. Only for guys that have been in your program at least 1 year. Number 18, the sway pitch returns in recruiting. Now, I haven't talked about recruiting in depth too much, but what I do want to highlight within recruiting is the sway pitch. So if you remember back on the old games, if a player did not align with your values, you could potentially call them and try to sway one of their values. That is brought back in College Football 25. So let's just say, for example, a player loves brand exposure, loves coach prestige, and loves to be on a championship contender team. So those three things are valuable. But you're Rice. You're a great academic school. This player should be wanting to come to your school because of the academics. You could attempt to sway him to value academics as well. There is a cost penalty to that as well, because if you succeed there, the player will now gain another value, which will help you now when you do get in contact with him and try to pitch him and try to get more points towards him coming to your school. But if you fail, you will lose points there. So a successful sway will unlock more pitches to maximize your influence gain, but the opposite way could definitely hurt you. Number 19, the coaching carousel begins the conference championship week. This is a big one because there is a lot of layers within the coaching carousel that were highlighted, but I won't go over all of them. But the one thing to note is that your coordinators and yourself can accept new jobs during conference championship week. This pretty much mimics real life because all the time there are breaking news that a coach accepts a position and they're still coaching at their current school. So this happens when a smaller program coach goes to a bigger program coach, or maybe a offensive coordinator takes a head coach at a smaller program, something like that. It happens literally in real life every single year. We see it every year, and I'm glad that that's in the game. So let's just say, for example, you're coaching in the MAC, right? Now you get finally a big break. You're at a smaller Big Ten school, but you still got to coach your team. You can finish out your career with that team either way you want. So you can pretty much say, you know what? Let's just blow it up and try a bunch of stuff before I leave. You can do that, or you can finish your career with that school with pride and gut it out there and then move on. But I think that's pretty cool. One thing to note about this is that your coordinators can also accept new positions, but you can only hire or you can only fire them in this conference championship week. If you decide to go past that week, you will not have the ability to fire a coordinator. You basically have to stick with them unless they take another job. So pretty much it's a 2-year contract for your coordinators, and that will be automatically renewed. So just be careful with that. You have to make sure you have your coordinator actions done during that week. All right, we're finally at the end here. Number 20 on the list, and this is one of my favorite ones. Larger schools equal larger recruiting budgets. So gone are the days where you can go to any school and pretty much have an equal playing ground. Now, if you go to a small MAC school, you might start with 500 recruiting points, as opposed to going to Ohio State. You're going to have 1,000 recruiting points to start out. So it will basically mimic real life, where bigger schools have bigger budgets than smaller schools who have smaller budgets. So now you're not only going to be at a disadvantage of, I cannot go after 5-star players as a small school or a 4-star player as a small school. You now don't have the budget to even do that. You have to be smart now, because you're going to have to go after guys that you are realistic at getting, and you cannot just cheese the system, which is amazing. Obviously, there are abilities in the future that you can unlock to get more points, but starting out right away, a larger school is going to have that large budget, and a smaller school, if you start out at it, is going to have a naturally, just realistic, to be honest, small budget as well. So that is going to do it for my top 20 underrated features in Dynasty. I am so excited for it. One small nugget here that I left off of the list: Teambuilder looks like it's going to be for online dynasties only. So you're going to have like an online private dynasty for Teambuilder. Now, I wonder for server reliability, how will that work? I'm not sure, but it's one thing to note that the one mention in this whole article was that Teambuilder is for online and you can't have that as offline. Maybe they will clarify that, but in this article, they kind of said it's just online. So you'll have to have a one user online Dynasty for yourself if you want to go the Teambuilder route. So stay tuned to my channel for more news as I do talk about more things college football 25. Hit subscribe, hit that like button. Let me know down in the comment section below your thoughts on the deep dive, and I will see you later. Stay tuned. Let's get it. Let's go.